Hi YouTubers! My name is Rachel Sattler, and today I am reviewing the nonfiction book titled Democracy in Black: How Race Still Enslaves the American Soul by Eddie Askew Jr., which I have been reading for my critical thinking class. To start off, I think the title and cover suggest that racial tensions in the United States are still a current issue, and never really spoken about as much as they were, say, 50 years ago. I also thought democracy was going to be seen from the black perspective in the book, hence Democracy in Black. So that kind of gave me an insight into what the book is going to be about. Now, I've never really learned in depth about this topic before, and I would like to note that I am not a history buff and do not have a degree in African American studies or even history. I also am not a genius in political knowledge of civil rights matters or even the specific presidencies in which it involved, but that's why I wanted to read the book, to learn about it. So to start off with a little overview, I thought Democracy in Black gave evidence and insight into the views, perspectives, and history of black democracy in the U.S., beginning with the birth of the U.S. and our founding fathers, all the way to the end of our first black president's second term in 2016, Barack Obama. I really like how Glaude goes into the really often forgotten world of blacks in the U.S. and their view of democracy. He even brings up the Black Depression in 2008 and the aftermath of it. He focuses on the worst effects of the recession on the black population, and how people's views of them lead to their everyday struggles and constant oppression even in the 21st century. Glaude also thinks about the significances of the murders of Trayvon Martin and Michael Brown, and even the idea behind the Black Lives Matter movement in 2014. Because of Glaude's organization, his various aspects of credibility, and his eventual call to action, I found this to be a very successful argument of black democracy as it stands in the 21st century, as well as a very enjoyable read, regardless of my level of previous knowledge. Right away, Glaude gives readers an introduction with 9 chapters following it, and a conclusion at the end. Each chapter explains a point or part of his thesis that he's trying to get the reader to understand. I noticed then that Glaude builds upon what he has already said. For example, if Glaude had not spoken about the value gap in Chapter 2, then I wouldn't have understood what he was talking about in Chapter 3 when he discusses racial habits and how they uphold the value gap. Glaude breaks down his reasons for his argument in each chapter, and as he builds the pieces, he simultaneously brings them together to finish into one conclusion at the end of the book. I think his organization helped me more deeply understand his points in a simpler way, as well as his general argument, that race is still an issue in the U.S. Because Glaude is organized with his information, I think I'm able to understand his argument the best that I can, so that in the future, I can be more educated in my decisions and my opinions that are based off of his argument. Another thing that I really enjoyed about Glaude, and what I thought he does really well, is being credible. In addition to his amazing amount of 241 references at the end of his book, Glaude has personal accounts of his research, making sure that he's credible for what he's saying. He includes in some of his own experiences in parts of America where black unemployment and home ownership are at their worst. He goes to the streets and homes of blacks in Ferguson, Missouri, Atlanta, Georgia, and more. He sees where blacks have lost their homes, their children, and even their livelihood to America. I thought of one example is when a Georgia woman lost her home to foreclosure in 2012. Glaude goes to her home and has an in-person interview with her, and even quotes his interview with her in his book. I think this shows that Glaude definitely reads what he speaks about, but I think his writing is also influenced by true accounts of what it is like to be an African American living in America in the 21st century. I think his knowledge and direct contact to black struggle strengthens his credibility. Glaude wanted his book to be the most informed it could be so that his argument would be taken seriously, and that there would be concrete evidence of what he is arguing. No one could deny his facts. Now, out of all of his aspects of credibility that I've already said, I think his background and education is the best of them. Glaude grew up in Mississippi and graduated from Morehouse College, a men's liberal arts school in Georgia. Liberal arts are meant to train students interdisciplinary thinking across multiple fields of academic study. Now we know that Glaude does have a solid foundation for critical thinking, writing, and even reading. Glaude today is a black professor at Princeton University, one of the most highly regarded universities in the country. People like Michelle Obama, a first lady, and JFK, a president whose term was coincidentally during the Civil Rights Movement, graduated from Princeton. Those were a couple of most politically influential people in America, or even the world, some could say. From that, I think we know that Glaude knows what he's talking about. He could be educating the future first ladies and presidents of America. He is not just some hobo off the street. He also teaches religion and African American studies, and is even the chair of the Department of African American Studies at the university. I think that shows his deep understanding of the social impact and history of the civil rights movement, as well as racial inequality attempts in the 21st century, so well that he is qualified to teach about it at an Ivy League university to some of the most potentially influential people in the world. So I think with his deep liberal education background and his thorough critical thinking skills that come with it, strengthen his understanding and therefore his credibility towards a very successful book. Now, although Glaude is, I think, a very rounded critical thinker and keeps in mind his more uneducated readers in his audience, I think he also still talks about specific facts, references, and events that common young people may not know a lot about. He talks about the presidencies of Bill Clinton and George Bush, and even black pop culture references like the movies The Butler and Selma. I think he does attempt to make his informative writing style simpler for some, but there are topics that he speaks of that he somewhat expects us readers to almost already have a good understanding of. I found myself a little confused on these topics, and even had to look some of them up on my computer, such as W.E.B. Du Bois or Reverend Sharpton, who were very influential in the civil rights movement. I think this took me away from the book. Sometimes I even had to go back and reread some of what I had already read to really understand what he was saying by that topic or event. I think here, Glaude could be a little more explanatory and understanding in his most complicated areas, but also continue to cater to his more advanced readers. Now, I understand that the book has already been written, and it may be a little expensive to reprint, but it might be something for him to think about for his future endeavors in influencing an even younger generation into his audience, so they may understand, be opinionated, and may even take action on their agreement with his argument. And as Glaude isn't informative enough, he actually leads his readers to take action. His goal is to make people uncomfortable about their racist views, and by doing that would help get rid of our racial habits and even close the value gap. He realizes that the only way to do something about our racial issues is to make whites uncomfortable. God calls us to leave our habits behind and wants us to understand the perspectives and daily struggles of blacks around us. He states, we have to change the terms of political debate. This involves, as I have suggested, changing our view of government, our view of black and white people, and our view of what matters to us as Americans. He calls this call to action a revolution of value that starts with influencing our government, and to quote him again, challenge the status quo in the streets and at the ballot box. Glaude wants us to physically react to a relatively common view that whites matter more than blacks in this country. I'm glad that Glaude gives his readers a stepping off point and leads us into action. He doesn't just let us and tell us about our struggling racial issues and leave us readers to fend for ourselves. I mean, this would almost contradict his sole purpose for writing his book, to attempt to solve America's racial issues. He sees fault in black and white former attempts to more or less solve our issue, and gives us readers better ways to put an end to black inequality in America for good. From that, I think we know that Glaude feels educated, strong, and confident enough about his argument that he wants us to be bold in our action. I think his confidence creates a very successful book, amongst very much other things. I think Glaude writes a very successful book overall for young adults striving for education in college, as well as even middle-aged, responsible American citizens from all different backgrounds. I think his book is digestible to any American citizen trying to learn more about their government and the effects it has on the world around them. Glaude does this through his organization, his amazing amount of credibility, as well as his very real call to action. Even though I did find some fault in his informative references and his writing style, there's still a lot to like about Glaude. Now, I enjoyed the book, but the more important question is, will you enjoy the book? I think you will, but you'll never know until you find out. I would love for you to go pick up a copy of Democarcy in Black, How Race Still Enslaves the American Soul by Eddie S. Glaude, Jr. I hope you have very happy reading.